I'm good at wasting time.
Welcome to The Other 51. I'm Brian, and this week we're chatting with Jesse Dougherty of the Washington Post about his new book, Buzzsaw. We might as well start making you a regular on this. You got a regular segment going on here.
I was gonna say, is my freelance check in the mail? Is that how this works?
We're about to bump you. We're about to bump you up from also starring in the credits to getting a spot in the main credits, I think. So
there you go. There you go. I'll take that. That'd be great.
So so last time we talked, it was in November, and we were talking about you were just starting to write your first book, and now it is April, and the book is out, which is insanely fast, by the way, just insanely fast for a book to be written and to come out. I'm assuming it felt insane to you too.
Yeah, it did. I mean, it was basically a 7-week writing timeline, and then a week and a half long editing process about. So from the start, I think I mentioned this to you in November, we had an 8-week block. And I think one of the original proposals was to write for 4 weeks and edit for 4 weeks. And it just wasn't going to happen that way. And I wouldn't have been able to do any additional reporting. So the 7 weeks actually enabled me. It's funny to think 7 weeks, if anyone has written a book, and I've only written one, so it kind of feels normal to me. It's like, that's insane. It actually ended up feeling longer because of the original prospect of writing it in 1 month. So I was like, wow, 7 weeks, I got all this time. And so I did end up making 30 phone calls, was able to actually report a little bit, do more research than I would have. But if it was just 1 month, I would have been head down the whole time typing. I basically was with an additional hour a day to actually report and gather information. But yeah, the timeline was insane.
So the book is Buzzsaw. And just to say right off the bat, you're my first former student that I know of that's published a book. I'm sure somebody else has, but so very, very proud to see that out
Appreciate
there.
it.
Haven't read it yet. It's on the list. It's about a mile high of books that I checked out before we went into lockdown here. And I wanted that before we get to writing the book and about the book itself. The book came out March 24th, if I remember correctly,
Yep.
Or thereabouts. So, what's it like to release a book in the middle of a global pandemic?
Yeah, tough. I mean, so you don't want to be selfish and annoyed about the ways your lives affected, right? But in my case, I had 3 or 4 book events canceled. A lot of obviously people can't go to bookstores. I was really excited on the Tuesday it came out to just walk down the street in my neighborhood and go to the local bookstore and see the book on the shelves, and I wasn't able to do that. So again, that did not bother me at all, considering what's going on in the world. But at the same time, it is a little bit of wind out of your sails because you did work really hard for however long you worked on this book. I know I have a buddy, Jared Diamond, who released a book right after me. And I know there's a bunch of other great baseball books out right now that everyone feels a little bit like. I thought the book tour and the celebration and the book party and whatever it was sort of like the icing on the cake and the kind of what you were working toward. And when that kind of gets pulled out, I guess you just have to find satisfaction in other ways. And the way that people on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and whatnot have shared the book and read it and shared their thoughts and engaged has been super, super satisfying. I don't want to act like that hasn't been a good replacement for what would have happened, because it's been flooring. I mean, it's been incredible to see all the people who have read it and especially spend their money during such a hard time. I can't say how much I appreciate that. But yeah, the way the week of the 24th played out was much different than I would have originally thought.
So how did it play out for you? What was that like?
So I went to Solid State Books in D.C. is my favorite bookstore. It's right in my neighborhood. From the start of the whole process, I asked Simon & Schuster to make sure my first event would be at Solid State. I wanted the publicist to work with them, and she did, and we had it all planned out. So that Monday, instead of having an event, we were going to have a big thing on Wednesday. I actually went to the store and signed 100 copies. So anyone who bought a copy from them would have gotten a signed copy, and they went really fast. So I've seen some people since say, I got a copy from them and it's not signed. And I said, well, that's a good thing. The book's selling. But so I signed 100 copies, did a quick little video promo. Tuesday, pretty much just holed up here at my house and did, 10 radio calls, heard myself saying the same thing over and over again about the book. And then Wednesday, in the place of what would have been the real event, we did a Twitter AMA on at 7 p.m. So the exact same time that people would have hypothetically been at Solid State Books, hearing me talk about the book. So I did that. A lot of people tuned in. That was really cool. And then otherwise, I just kind of waited around. I mean, the one thing about this is I would say it kind of made me even more crazy. Generally, I'm kind of really hyper focused and if I had a book come out in the given week and then had to go cover the national season opening series against the Mets, I probably would have been able to tune out book stuff for a bit. In this case, I was just here in my living room and I'm checking Amazon rankings every 10 seconds and checking my sales numbers and checking, Twitter to see if a new person had read it. So I would say that in the absence of having something to take my mind off the book, I probably got a little too nuts in my head about it, trying to see publicity and reviews and who's writing about it now. So in that way, I really missed, baseball. For a lot of reasons, I missed baseball, but in that way, I missed having something else to take my mind off.
What was it like getting interviewed all those times on the radio that day?
Yeah, weird. So we do it a lot at the Post, in the Washington Post. Like during the playoffs, I was kind of used to it. Like we would do 3 or 4 or 5 hits in a day. But that generally, like when you go to different radio shows for that, they're asking different things, at least somewhat. Whereas now, like the book conversation is pretty standard. It's like, what's your favorite part? What's, how long did you have? And who's your favorite person to interview? And why did you want to write this book? And so I hate in the sense that I kind of felt myself almost playing like pre-recorded answers out of my mouth, but in some ways, like it started to happen. So it was weird in that sense. And it wasn't just talking about the team, whereas like I could talk about Max Scherzer's injury or Trey Turner's finger or whatever it is, or like Juan Soto's swing, like is really easily, and it's really breezy for me to do that. Talking about myself's a little weirder, especially on the radio when I'm used to going on there to talk about other people. So that was a little bizarre, but it mostly dissolved into just conversations about the Nationals World Series or on the other local radio. Wanted to just relive that. Right now, everyone's feeling very nostalgic, I think, and trying to sort of think of better times. So in that sense, it feels familiar in a lot of ways.
So what's one question that you didn't get in these interviews that you wanted to get or would have liked to have gotten?
That's super interesting. Wow, that's a tough one. I was happy that people asked about the cover because I think it's a unique cover for a championship book. And that came late. So I guess I was thinking about that in the midst of all the interviews. I was hoping people would ask about the cover. And that's one that I got it at the end. So I can't say I didn't get that. But that's the one that comes to mind, saying that's really. And then I guess maybe who didn't talk for the book would have been interesting, because we talk a lot about who did and who I got for interviews and how great that was, but who didn't talk for the book is maybe interesting as well.
All right, so let's handle them both. First of all, tell me about the cover.
The cover is just Juan Soto. He's dropped to his knees, hands reaching to the sky, eyes closed at the end of the World Series. And the back cover is the classic team shot, all mobbing each other on the mound. And I can't even take credit for it. As the cover designers at Simon & Schuster made the great point that every championship book typically has that shot on the cover. We can see it. The catcher and the pitcher and they're hugging and the team's running toward them, and it's a great shot, and it makes the front page of every newspaper for a reason. It's jubilation and to the highest degree and all those things. But the Juan Soto picture, we thought really encapsulated the emotions of the book that were relief as much as anything, euphoria in that relief, and fun. I mean, just like him sort of on his knees and smiling and just like looking up to the sky. I mean, just so in a lot of ways, I didn't want it to just be a Nationals 2019 book. I wanted it to be a DC baseball book. And when you think about 33 years of baseball not being there, and then 05 Nats come back and they're terrible for 6 years, and then for the next 7 years they're competing, but they're always losing the big game. There was so much relief in that moment. There was so much like we finally did it. And I thought that photo encapsulated that emotion much better than everyone mobbing around Daniel Hudson would have encapsulated that emotion.
And who didn't talk to you?
Who didn't talk to me? So I did not get, and I don't want to necessarily frame it as like who didn't talk to me, like who just did not talk to me, but so Dave Martinez was the big one, the manager, and there's a lot in the book, and anyone that I've mentioned that to them, they're like, what? You didn't get him? You have so much about him. And that's because we talked a lot during the season. I gathered so much for profiles and just conversations on the side and the dugout. And I'm glad in hindsight that I did that for at the time when I didn't know where it would ever go. And then in this case, I ended up needing it for a book where he didn't talk. And it was a few different things. He went on the public speaking circuit right after the World Series. So he was just like totally swamped in that. And then by the time sort of we had worked it out and we had gone back and forth for a while, and I wanted to go visit him at home, and he didn't really want to do that because he just wanted to be private, and I get it. So we didn't do that. And I said, well, how about a phone call? And it took a few weeks just to kind of, coordinate it. And he was traveling. And then by the end, when he said, I'll talk to you, the book was pretty much on the shelf. Like not on the shelf necessarily, but it was getting printed and getting ready. So That's one big miss. Juan Soto, I was not able to get, and that was more just a coordination thing. And again, like I had profiled him twice for the post. And there's a lot of info in there where you may be surprised to see for someone who didn't talk, but this was leftover information. Steven Strasburg and Anthony Rendon, who typically aren't great with interviews. I mean, they don't like to do them, so that was expected. And then Ryan Zimmerman didn't end up getting coordinated. So just about everybody else, all the key other people that you would think, I did get, but those 5 people were people that I would love to have talked to, but just it didn't work out.
So let's back up a little bit. So how did the book? Because we talked in November, not long after the World Series, and you were already working on it. So how did this book come to you, or how did you come to the book? What was that whole process like?
So I was lucky in the sense that for a while ago, so 2 summers ago, an editor at Simon & Schuster named Sean Manning, reached out to me to potentially work on another book. Just to had an idea. I thought I would be good for it. And at the time I couldn't do it. I mean, just subjects didn't agree. I couldn't get book leave, whatever. It just didn't really work out. But we kind of built this relationship on that, the idea that we didn't get to work on this book we wanted to. Maybe one day we'll circle back. So 2 days after the World Series, it's Friday afternoon, I'm sitting in my office at home, and I get an email from Sean saying, "You want to write a book on the Nationals?" And I at first kind of thought he was kidding, because over the years since we had that one project sort of fall through, we've sort of always like emailed like, "How about a book on this?" Like it's kind of just almost become like a flippant thing because we want to work together. But in this case, he really was interested. So I was like, yeah, we got on the phone that afternoon. I was kind of go from there. And I needed an agent. I needed to sort of learn this process of negotiating a book deal on the fly. I had never done that, as you know, I'm just kind of starting the industry at 25, and it just was very new to me. And I did all that. I mean, I agreed to, contract with an agent the next week, and then by the next Monday we had a deal. I guess we kind of negotiated on Saturday, and then by November 11th, I think, so it was 2 Mondays after the World Series, I was writing. I was in Scottsdale for the GM meetings and covering the Nationals and GM Mike Rizzo, and then I would finish my work for the day. And I remember all the writers were going into the bar at the hotel we were all staying at, and I was outside by the fire pit starting my book. That's where I started. So the first words were written in Scottsdale during the GM meetings at night. So it started a crazy, wacky process, but it was like it came together really in a week, I would say.
So what's that process like? You mentioned earlier you had 7 weeks to write it, but originally it was only going to be 4. And you're starting to write it when you're covering the GM meetings. So you're still working your day job at the Post covering the Nats while you're writing this. So what was your writing schedule like, your process like for it? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, about 2,000 words a day I figure I had like 44 days when it came down to it to write. And originally they wanted me to file 75,000 words. That was the low end, 75 to 85. So I thought if I wrote 2,000 words a day, I'll stay on track to be on top, be over that. And I would have a little wiggle room to not write maybe toward the end. I ended up like not really doing it that way. I ended up writing like 6,000 words one day. And then the whole winter meetings in San Diego, I just reported. So I took 4 days off from writing, which actually ended up being critical because I got to clear my head. I got to make almost every phone call to every player. I did it from a conference room in between sort of other interviews working for the Post. I did my Mike Rizzo interview there, which ended up being the prologue and epilogue of the book in his hotel room. And so the taking off 4 days in the middle just to paper report, if I did this again and had as quick of a time frame, I probably would build in a shortened week, a 4 or 5 day period to report, because that was huge for me. I don't think I would have been able to make those calls and really get all that done otherwise. So, but it was having to be probably much more disciplined than I usually am. I am a procrastinator. I do like to sort of wait till the last minute. And in this case, it wasn't going to be, I could wait till December 20th and start typing. I would have just been totally screwed. So, but I remember visiting my editor, Sean, in New York around Thanksgiving, and being like, dude, there's no way I'm at July already and I'm only at 20,000 words. There's no way I'm going to get to 75. And he goes, trust me, you will. And it's funny, any editor at the Post that works for me will be like, yeah, you wrote over word count. I know you did. I ended up filing 105,000 words. So the first manuscript I sent was 105,000 words. We probably cut 10,000 out of it. So it ended up being a 95,000 word book. But I certainly overshot. But I thought originally, I was like, there's just no way. I'm already halfway through the year and I'm only at 20,000 words. How is this going to happen? Then the playoffs hit and I guess I had a lot to say.
I was going to say, once the early part of any baseball season is not
Yeah.
as critical as that. So, in kind of, I'm interested in the writing. I'm interested in a lot in this book, but in terms of like thinking through structure of the book, because I see this talking to a lot of young writers and a lot of students. Structure of a story or of a book is as important as everything else. So, having not read the book yet, as I said, it's on the list. How did you decide to structure the book? I mean, is it this the year in review, and how do you build in, like you said, the history of DC baseball and kind of like a lot of this backstory? So it's not just a year in the life of the Nationals; it's kind of something bigger.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Honestly, now that I think about it, a lot of the radio hits I did and appearances were not like writing related podcasts like this, but I'm glad you asked that question, because had I had more time, and I don't want to like talk in hypotheticals, but like I would have really liked to have tried something kind of like wacky and different. So like Gene Levy's biography of Sandy Koufax is told through the 9 innings of his perfect game, which is like to me is like so cool, right? Like, and so I was thinking like if I had 6 months to work on this, maybe I try something where it's a 7-part book for 7 games of the World Series, and it breaks off into biographical parts for players as they come up big, and it goes back in the season, and it's like game 1, game 2, game 3, and we do sort of a cool thing that way. I didn't do that. I went start to finish from the season, but what I did do was almost assign, outside of like 5 chapters, maybe I think there's like 24, 25 chapters. Outside of 5 of them, every chapter has some character. So everything's sort of profile based. I kind of saw them as like 25 standalone magazine or sports paper profiles, and wanted to sort of, and obviously they fit in this fabric of the season and the narrative, but chapter 5 is about the trade deadline, but it's really the Mike Rizzo chapter, or maybe it's chapter 6, but whatever it is. And then the wild card game chapter is about Juan Soto, because he hits the game winning single, and it goes back in his life, growing up with his dad's games in the Dominican Republic, and right after that, Steven Strasburg and the NLDS, and how he was the main guy in the pitching plan, but it goes back in his whole story of being the 19-year-old star, 21-year-old star, and just kind of like getting blunt, having all his enthusiasm blunted by all this attention, and just so I really tried to sort of have everything go back to a person. I wanted people to read this and not just feel like they were recapping game stories or getting sort of rewritten sort of summaries. I wanted them to feel like they were reading a story, and the idea with the Nats, I mean, it's on the cover, the improbable story of the Nationals 2019 World Series. It's improbability is a major theme. So sort of the idea of how everyone gets to that same point, what has to happen in a career for all 26, 27 of those people, counting the manager and the GM and the scouts, to be on the field at the same time in Houston to win the World Series is pretty remarkable. Mm-hmm. And you can say that any season, but with this group, it felt particularly so. I mean, Sean Doolittle switching from position player to closer when he got injured, and Gerardo Parra being released, but then getting signed by the Nats in May as this like scrap heap addition who maybe is going to, work out, ends up being like the heart of the team. And there's just like all these little things along the way that you're like, wow, this guy had back-to-back Tommy John surgery, was done, and then he ends up coming all the way back. So that idea of improbability was something I really wanted to play up the whole time, but you have to show how everyone gets there in order to really drive that home.
So you mentioned the idea of dividing it up into think of it almost as like 25 or so magazine profile pieces. I'm wondering, did that help in writing it? Because now all of a sudden it's not this 80,000, 90,000 word book that you've got looming. It's a 2,000 word profile or 3,000 word chapter profile thing, which is a little bit more something we as writers we're a little bit more used to, especially newspaper types. That's a chunk that you can wrap your head around a little easier.
Probably in theory that should have helped. I don't know if anything helped. Because the stress of it is like when you have all this material, right? Like as a newspaper reporter, I feel this all the time. Like the most stressed I ever am is diving into a big feature where I've reported it well and I know it should be good, because all you want to do is not mess it up. So like it's probably the stories I most procrastinate on. Like a quick game story off a Nats game, you just sit down and write. But the 3,000 word feature you're writing on Max Scherzer, you wait on because you don't want to mess up, and you're just trying to like delay the idea that you might mess up. And that's more of like a psychological thing, but it's something I deal with a lot. And for this book, like I kind of woke up every morning being like, I got to write the best feature on the Nats I've ever written today. Like no matter what, I mean, it's like, but just it's a Tuesday and it's November 12th, but I got to wake up and write a really, really good feature. And that to me was stressful. So probably thinking it in the terms of each chapter being a feature maybe ended up being debilitating to an extent, rather than helping me break it into like, digestible segments, and more made me cognizant of the breadth of what I was writing and how much I had to deliver on it. But I think you're right. for maybe a normal person, what you said totally works out.
So I wanted to ask too, you mentioned you're a procrastinator, and same.
Yeah.
Procrastinating on a writing project right now while I do this interview. So it kind of works out. How did you find that discipline to kind of overcome your natural tendencies on this?
Yeah, it's funny. It's like when I originally got the assignment, I was talking to my agent and editors at Simon and Schuster, and they said, you have to file 75,000 words in 7 weeks. Can you do it? And I think, like, in newspapers, we're deadline junkies. Like I kind of thought, or I said out loud to them, well, sometimes I'm asked to write 800 words in 3 minutes. So yeah, I can do it. I mean, that's like, and I think they kind of laughed and were like, yeah, well, this is a lot different, dude. But in my head, it's like, give me, I think kind of what we always say is like, give me a time and give me a number and I'll hit it. Right. It's like, so in this case, it was just stretched out. It was that thrill and that challenge stretched out over 7 weeks. So I never doubted that I would do it, but I had to really take a, detailed approach in how I would do it. So like you said, like overcoming that procrastination, kind of, it's like I had no choice. It's like, it's kind of like the same thing. Like you could think about it in those terms. If you get, if a World Series game flips in the last minute and, there's a walk-off home run and your editor's like, you have 5 minutes. You can't be like, well, let me look into my notes real quick. And like, you can't, you have to write. And in this case, it was just that feeling, that urgent feeling of, I can't really, just like wait on this, stretched out for almost 2 months. So it was stressful for sure. But like I overcame it because I just didn't really have it.
Okay. What was the moment like when you finished? So like do you remember that moment? Like either
Absolutely.
When you got okay, what was it like?
So I work at, I'm sad I can't be there right now, but I work at Sadamo Coffee Shop in H Street in DC, my favorite place in the world. I started the book there, or I was working on the proposal there and then finished it there. And Ken Fee, who's the owner, is kind of knew I was working on the book the whole time. I come in every day and sit down. Sometimes I was closing the store, literally go from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. and they would let me write while they were closing up. And I was due at noon, my manuscript, and I hit send on it. I stood up and kind of stretched, and he goes, "The book?" I said, "Yeah." And then we hugged in the store. So I'm hugging the Sadamo Coffee Shop owner in the middle of Sadamo Coffee, and he's like, "Coffee on me." And I was like, "Oh man, nothing else. I'm gonna put coffee on this." So yeah, I remember that perfectly, and just being so relieved because for 7 weeks, like I said, it sort of governs your entire life. It's like, hey, dinner with friends. I've only written 1,500 words. I got to stay in. Come home for a weekend to your niece's ballet recital. Like I'm just behind. Like it's just you really had to. I mean, I went home for Christmas, but I wrote a lot over Christmas. I went out to LA for Thanksgiving, but I wrote a lot over Thanksgiving with family, and it really just it controlled my whole life for 7 weeks. So the feeling of that not being the case anymore. I mean, the thing is, we were working so fast, so even right after I filed, it was like, okay, photo captions, okay, edits, okay, like next thing. So really, I wasn't out of the woods until I filed the first manuscript full manuscript on January 11th. I wasn't out of the woods probably until like February 1st. Okay. Totally out of the woods. Or maybe like a little bit before that. But it felt really good once that happened, especially getting the whole manuscript in was really the big hurdle.
So what is it about the coffee shop or about either that coffee shop or writing coffee shops in general for you?
Yeah, I mean, I can't nap. I mean, I guess I could, but like that's a big one, right? It's like you can't turn on the TV or nap. So that helps with procrastination, not being home. So that's something I'm struggling with now, being a full-time work from home, worker and a writer is like, oh, I'll just read on the couch or I'll just, take a quick nap. Like if you really commit yourself to being at somewhere all day, it's hard to sort of slack off. So I would really, like I said, go from a full work day, like a 9 to 5, all at the coffee shop. And I would do work for the Post there, right? I mean, but I made it like my home base, the corner table, and I would keep buying coffee and they would fill me up when they were at the bottom of a, coffee urn, and it just was like, it was great. And they had lunch and they could cover you in every meal. So I was set. I was really set. But I do like that. I mean, the biggest thing really is that helped my procrastination as well.
So kind of getting away from the book a little bit now, working at the Post, there's obviously no baseball happening right now. Yeah. So you've moved kind of into a hybrid role. Is that right?
Yeah. So I'm still doing sports. I mean, obviously, to this point, we've had a good amount of news to cover. It's sort of slowing down. And then I'm still covering the Nationals as things come up. And I wrote a story last week on what would have been their home opener and their banner raising ceremony, and kind of told it through the lives of people that have been affected by this. And we're obviously doing something else. So there's sports stories to tell for sure. And then I'm also helping out with the post live updates file. So that's 24 hours on the homepage. Free to everyone, even if you're not a subscriber. So, and it's that's a lot of quick turn news and getting out the doing the White House press briefing and press conferences for various governors every day. And I'm doing that a few times a week. And then otherwise, I have the longitude to pitch stories on the coronavirus that are not sports related. It's kind of all hands on deck. I will say, not to go on a soapbox tangent, but I am really proud to be at the Post right now. I felt that from a sports section standpoint, that a lot of places turned the page really quickly in a way that I felt was a little bit tone deaf and started just covering sports as if it was business as usual. And I think we have a really unique opportunity here to sort of speak to an audience that maybe isn't seeking that coronavirus news, comes to our page and flips to our page in the newspaper or comes to our website maybe they're looking for that post on the 10 best nationals of all time, or they're looking on for the post on whatever it may be. And that's not to say we haven't covered sports normally. We've covered NFL free agency as is, and we've covered things. We did the top 30 movies list to watch, and we haven't. But I think the balance of it has been really smart and really tasteful right now for what's a really important story around the world. And that's not to bash any individual outlet, but I have felt that I've seen on my Twitter feed that places really quickly, pulled the trigger on going away from that and saying we're going to be the outlet that gives you your regular programming. And frankly, I don't think it's a time to be apathetic or a time to sort of, dodge the necessary programming. Maybe that's old and crotchety for me, but it's just something that I've really noticed.
So what are some of the coronavirus stories, either in sports or non-sports, what are one or two that you really would like to do or really think should be done right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think the ongoing sort of saga of people who are not getting paid during this time and are just really struggling with this is important, and we've done it to some degree, and I think we can continue to do it. So digging into their lives and showing that there are people that rely on this industry as sort of a internal clock thing. They know every year in March or April they're going to start getting regular work, but now it's it's obviously difficult for them, and I think maybe profiling some of those people is something I'm really interested in, something I'm pursuing, and continuing to tell their story. And then maybe on the non-sports side, I think obviously we've done a lot of work about medical workers, and there's an Eli Saslow story out this weekend that just goes into a guy in Chicago who's operating ventilators, and it's really scary, and it's really important work. But also emergency responders, people who work ambulances, people who are dispatchers, taking calls, almost acting as quasi psychologists right now, talking to people who are just scared and have nowhere else to go. I think there's a lot of really interesting things at play, whether that's in New York City or a place like Washington, D.C. that promises to be the next hotspot. I think there's a lot of, different things to tell, and a lot of people, affected by this. So lawyers who have clients in overcrowded prisons who are trying to, deal with that. There's just, I don't know, my brain definitely turns to a bunch of different things on it. And the fun thing about the Post is that there's always someone working on something who has expertise in something that you can kind of go to and pick their brain or see what they're working on. I just think it's a really interesting time to be in the newspaper. And again, I'm really proud of the work everyone's done there.
So what's it like to be back or writing news?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really done much yet, right? But it's different for sure. I will say, this kind of brings me back to my high school days. So my high school sports reporting days, I should say. So when I first got to the Post, I was a high school sports reporter, and one of the best parts about that job, I think, as a training ground, is that there's no stat database. There's no, baseballreference.com. There's no website where the box score is. You have to really get all the information yourself. So it kind of brings me back to that because, over the weekend, I profiled an 102-year-old woman who was born during the Spanish flu and then has lived through the Great Depression and World War II and sort of had this really interesting perspective on how right now mirrors a lot of different points of our history. So drawing parallels between the coronavirus age, I guess you could say, and World War II mostly, but also speaking about how her father and her uncle had, the Spanish flu, and how it will follow her for the rest of her lives, sort of maybe foreshadowing, children who are born right now will always hear about the coronavirus. So, but when I wrote about her, there was no way for me to just go look up her Wikipedia page or, and look up and then get the related links to go to old profiles. And there was no way for me to sort of, check her age or check everything without calling her back and fact checking it, which is such a novel concept sometimes in sports because we're spoon fed so much information. But it was kind of fun and exciting to get back into the mode of actually having to report everything out down to the where do you live? What's your last name? How do you spell it? That's something, again, that is such a fundamental part of reporting that I think when you start covering professional sports, you sort of forget about because everything is so readily available. So that to me I haven't done it much yet outside of, the live updates and then this profile on this woman, Lucille Elson. But as I continue to do it, hopefully, I think I'll probably find that there's a lot more of that, going back to sort of the basics, so to speak, that I was doing when I first got to the Post.
And what's it like to report when you're working in your apartment?
Tough for sure. I'm kind of used to working remotely. I mean, as baseball reporters, I'm not missing the office right now. It's just not somewhere I really go a lot, but I'm missing the ballpark for sure. It's like my remote office, and missing people that I can speak to face to face. And I don't necessarily think of myself as someone who's really dynamic as a phone interviewer. I think I have friends and colleagues who I'm astounded when I read their stories and hear that they did that over the phone. I don't really fancy myself as someone who's good at that. I hope I'm getting better at it. I'm trying to, but that was never a strength of mine. Like I even have friends in college who they would say, I wrote this profile, I called two people and whatever. And I'd be like, you got this off the phone? What did you do? It's always kind of been sort of a foreign concept to me. I've always been much better at observing and, talking to people in person. That's more my strength as a reporter, but we're going to have to learn for sure. I mean, everyone's adjusting.
So this is coming. What's the best thing you've read lately?
So this is really recency bias. I don't say recency bias, but it's really recent. Stephanie McCrummen for the Washington Post went to Elmhurst, in the Elmhurst neighborhood in Queens recently, and profiled sort of a funeral home during the coronavirus outbreak, and did almost a day in the life, just a narrative of one day. And I thought it was heart-wrenching, and the way she wrote it made it feel so visceral and real. And Stephanie McCrummen is one of the best writers in the world. And doing features at the Washington Post, and I thought it was something I had thought about. Like, man, wouldn't it be powerful and scary and revealing if somebody would go to a funeral home right now and write about that? I talked to my roommate, who's also a Washington Post writer, about that idea, and we were like, oh wow, yeah, that would be good. And then of course Stephanie comes out with a story like that really thereafter, way ahead of it than I was. By the time I thought of it, she probably had filed 3 drafts, and I just thought the story was excellent. It's called Death Without Ritual. So the idea that people are dying right now and not able to have funerals, and these funeral homes are really backed up, and Elmhurst is a neighborhood that's been hit really hard by the coronavirus, so probably shows us what other neighborhoods have in store, just because it was one of the it was on the advent of the virus in the U.S. and was hit really hard from the beginning. So that's, again, not too uplifting, but that's the best thing I've read recently.
So that's good. I'll have that in show notes. And since we all need stuff to read, I'll do some recommendations too. I can recommend The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead.
Yes, great book.
Fantastic book. I just finished it last night. Again, not the super most uplifting book you're going to read, but a beautifully written, beautifully told story. You said you've read it?
Yeah, it's great. And in some ways, like, it is journalistic in a lot of ways too.
Yeah.
The way you sort of, it's revealed later kind of the process in which he wrote that book. But when you realize kind of what the reporting and the research that went into it, it's pretty astounding that a lot of it's real. So.
All right. So the book is Buzzsaw. It is out independent bookstores, Amazon, any place you buy books.
Yeah. Bookshop.org and IndieBound are 2 great places to order right now, just because that will connect you with a local bookstore in your area. I know a lot are still delivering and really looking for orders to fulfill because it's a tough time for them. So bookshop.org and IndieBound are 2 great ways to order the book right now.
Fantastic. And we'll probably end up doing this soon, the way things go. So
yeah, co-host, part-time co-host.
Love it. All right. Thanks, Jesse.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
As always, thanks for listening to The Other 51. You can find show notes for this episode and all our episodes at sportsmediaguy.com on the Other 51 tab. You can subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. I can highly recommend Overcast for this. Our theme music is by Ellie Moritz.